The surface web represents only 4% of the entire internet. The remaining 96% lurks beneath, hidden from search engines, inaccessible through normal browsers, inhabited by those who never want to be found. Tonight, 3 genuine accounts from individuals who ventured into the dark web and discovered that anonymity works both ways. They thought they were invisible. They were wrong. Before we descend into the darkness, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time shows on your clock right now. I want to know who's entering these depths with me tonight. If you haven't already, smash that subscribe button, hit the like icon, ring that notification bell. Let's begin. 600 anonymous viewers paid cryptocurrency to watch me suffer in real time, and I had no idea the camera was even active. My name is Tavian, and this nightmare unfolded during November of 2016 in my apartment in Austin, Texas. I was 29, employed as a network security analyst for a mid-sized technology firm. The bitter irony of my profession haunts me still. I spent my days protecting corporate systems from intrusion, while my own digital life was being systematically dismantled by predators I never saw coming. The infiltration began with a romance. I had been using dating applications for approximately 8 months without a meaningful connection. Endless conversations that faded into nothing. First dates that never produced second ones. The exhausting cycle of digital courtship that modern singles endure. Then I matched with a woman who called herself Devin. Her profile photographs showed an attractive brunette in her late 20s. Her biography mentioned interests that aligned perfectly with mine: cybersecurity, independent films, and hiking in state parks. Our initial conversations flowed naturally, filled with humor and intellectual engagement that felt genuine. After 2 weeks of messaging, Devin suggested we transition to video calls. I agreed eagerly. The video chat confirmed what her photographs had suggested. She was beautiful, articulate, and seemingly interested in building something real. We video chatted regularly for the following month, sometimes for hours. We discussed our careers, our families, our hopes for the future. She lived in Denver, she said, working remotely as a software developer. The distance complicated potential meetings, but we discussed plans for me to visit Colorado in December. I believed I was falling in love. What I didn't understand was that every video call was being recorded. Every private moment I shared was being cataloged. Every vulnerability I revealed was being weaponized for future use. The first indication of trouble arrived in my work email on November 14th. The message contained no text in the body, only attachments. 17 photographs extracted from our video conversations. Images of me in various states of undress. Images captured during intimate moments I had believed were private exchanges between 2 consenting adults, building a relationship. The subject line read, "Payment required or distribution begins." I sat frozen at my desk, my professional environment suddenly feeling contaminated by the intrusion. My hands trembled as I opened a second email that arrived moments later. This message contained instructions. I was directed to access a specific dark web address through the Tor browser. There, I would find a countdown timer and a cryptocurrency wallet address. I had 72 hours to transfer 3 Bitcoin to the specified wallet. Failure to comply would result in the photographs being distributed to my employer, my family, my professional network, and several adult websites that specialize in non-consensual intimate imagery. The message concluded with a demonstration of their capabilities. It listed my mother's email address, my sister's Facebook profile, my supervisor's LinkedIn account, my company's general inquiry address, every recipient who would receive the photographs if I failed to pay. I accessed the dark web address from my personal device after leaving work early. claiming illness that wasn't entirely fabricated. The site displayed exactly what the email had promised: a countdown timer showing 69 hours remaining, a cryptocurrency wallet address, and a preview gallery of the photographs that would be distributed. But there was more. The site also displayed a chat function with active participants, hundreds of usernames scrolling past, comments about my appearance, speculation about my profession, bets on whether I would pay, and a video feed, a live video feed showing my apartment, my living room, captured through my own laptop camera, which I had believed was deactivated. The feed was being broadcast to everyone visiting this dark web page. My terror was their entertainment. I slammed my laptop closed. I ripped the power cord from the wall. I stood in my apartment gasping, my heart pounding, my mind struggling to process the violation. They had compromised my devices, not just recorded our video chats. They had installed malware that gave them persistent access to my camera, my microphone, my files. Everything I had done on that laptop for who knows how long had been observable to unknown parties. I called the Austin Police Department. A detective from the cybercrime unit agreed to meet with me the following morning. He reviewed the emails, the dark website, and the evidence of the blackmail scheme. His assessment offered no comfort. "This is a sophisticated operation," Detective Harwell explained. "The romantic approach is common. They call it sextortion. They build relationships, collect compromising material, and then leverage it for payment. The dark web component makes tracing extremely difficult. The cryptocurrency makes the money nearly impossible to recover." "What can I do?" I asked. "Honestly, most victims pay. The perpetrators usually honor the agreement because their business model depends on reputation. If word spreads that they distribute material even after payment, victims stop paying. And if I don't pay?" The detective's expression answered before his words. "Then they probably distribute. And once images are on the internet, removing them completely is essentially impossible." I spent the following 24 hours in anguished deliberation. Paying felt like surrender. It funded criminal enterprises and encouraged future victimization. It provided no guarantee that additional demands wouldn't follow once they knew I was willing to comply. But the alternative meant my family seeing those images. My employer is potentially terminating me for conduct violations. My professional reputation was destroyed. My intimate moments are permanently archived on websites designed for humiliation. I paid. I purchased Bitcoin through an exchange. I transferred the amount to the specified wallet. I watched the countdown timer reset to 0. A message appeared confirming receipt and promising deletion of all materials. For 6 days, nothing happened. I began to believe the nightmare had ended. Expensive, humiliating, but concluded. Then a second payment demand arrived. The new message referenced additional recordings I hadn't known existed. Audio from phone conversations, screen recordings of private messages, additional intimate imagery captured through my compromised camera during moments I had believed were entirely solitary. The new demand was 5 Bitcoins. The countdown was 48 hours. I realized the truth that victims of these schemes eventually discover. Paying doesn't end the exploitation. It identifies you as someone willing to pay. It transforms you from a one-time target into a renewable revenue stream. I contacted the detective again. He confirmed my suspicion. "Multiple demands are common," he said. "They'll keep extracting until you stop paying or run out of money. Some victims are blackmailed for months, years. The only thing that stops it is refusing to pay and accepting the distribution." I made the most difficult decision of my life. I told my family before the criminals could. I sat with my parents and my sister and explained what had happened. The fake relationship, the recorded intimacy, the blackmail, the payment I had already made, the additional demands I was refusing. The conversation was excruciating. My mother cried. My father's disappointment was palpable. My sister's attempts at supportive understanding couldn't mask her discomfort. But they heard it from me, in my words, with context and explanation that the criminals wouldn't provide. I informed my employer through the Human Resources Department. I documented the situation, the cybercrime report, the ongoing investigation. The company's legal team determined that since the relationship had been conducted on personal time using personal devices, no policy violation had occurred. My employment remained secure. The criminals distributed the material anyway. The photographs appeared on multiple websites within a week of my refusal of payment. The video recordings surfaced on platforms I had never heard of. For approximately 2 months, searching for my name returned results that documented my humiliation. I hired a service that specialized in the removal of non-consensual intimate imagery. They worked with platforms to take down the content. They issued legal demands under relevant state laws. They submitted requests to search engines to de-index the offending results. Most of the material eventually disappeared from mainstream accessibility, but the dark web archives remained. Somewhere, on servers I couldn't identify or access, the recordings of my victimization persist indefinitely. The woman I knew as Devon was never identified. The profiles she had used were deleted within hours of my refusal to continue paying. The dark website rotated to new addresses regularly, always staying ahead of any enforcement efforts. The operation continued targeting new victims while my case gathered dust in an overloaded detective's files. I changed careers after that year. I couldn't continue working in network security while my own digital life had been so thoroughly compromised. I now work in a field entirely disconnected from technology. I don't own a laptop. I don't engage in video calls. I cover the cameras on any device I'm forced to use. The relationship I thought I was building with Devon lasted approximately 6 weeks. The recovery from what followed has consumed years and continues still. Someone had been living as me for 14 months before I discovered that my identity belonged to a stranger. I am called Finn Tan, and what I'm recounting happened during February of 2024 in Chicago, Illinois, where I work as a hospital administrator. This account involves the dark web, not through my own access to those hidden networks, but through my data's appearance there without my knowledge or consent. My story demonstrates that you don't need to visit the dark web to become its victim. The discovery began with a letter from the Internal Revenue Service. The letter stated that I owed significant taxes on income I had never earned. According to IRS records, I had worked for 3 different employers in states I had never visited during the previous tax year. I had earned substantial wages. I had failed to report this income. I owed penalties and interest on top of the unpaid taxes. My first assumption was simple fraud. Someone had used my social security number to obtain employment. This happens to millions of Americans annually. Irritating, but manageable. I called the IRS, initiated a fraud report, and assumed the matter would resolve itself through normal bureaucratic processes. Then I received a call from a detective in Phoenix, Arizona. Detective Aldana informed me that my name had appeared in connection with a criminal investigation. Not as a victim, as a suspect. Someone using identification bearing my name, my social security number, and my photograph had been arrested for financial crimes in Phoenix. That person had posted bail and subsequently disappeared. A warrant now existed for my arrest. I had never been to Phoenix. I had never committed any crime. I had a verifiable alibi for every date mentioned in the investigation. I had been working at the hospital in Chicago, surrounded by witnesses and documented by electronic timekeeping systems. But someone with my identity had been in Phoenix, had committed crimes, had built a life using my information. Detective Aldana was sympathetic but explained the complexity. Clearing my name would require extensive documentation, legal proceedings, perhaps testimony at trials. The person who had stolen my identity had been thorough. They had obtained driver's licenses, credit cards, even a passport in my name. They had created a complete alternate existence using my biographical details. I hired an attorney who specialized in identity theft cases. The initial investigation revealed the scope of my problem. My identity had been sold on the dark web, not just my social security number, my complete identity package, date of birth, mother's maiden name, first pet's name, first school attended, security question answers from major financial institutions, a compilation of data scraped from breached databases, data brokers, social media archives, and sources that couldn't be identified. The dark web listing had offered verified complete identity, clean credit, no flags, for approximately $3,000 in cryptocurrency. Based on sales records obtained through the attorney's forensic investigation, my identity package had been purchased at least 4 times by different buyers. 4 separate individuals were living as me simultaneously. The Arizona criminal was just the first to surface. Over the following weeks, evidence of other fraudulent versions of myself emerged. A second buyer had used my identity to obtain mortgages for properties in Nevada. 3 homes purchased with my name and credit, then rented out for passive income. The mortgages were now in default. The properties faced foreclosure. My credit report listed debts exceeding $1 million. A third buyer had used my identity to incorporate a business in Florida. The business appeared to be a front for money laundering operations connected to drug trafficking organizations. Federal investigators were now interested in my involvement. More interviews. More documentation. More proof required that I wasn't the person who had signed those incorporation papers. A fourth buyer remained unidentified. Evidence suggested they were using my identity for purposes that hadn't yet generated legal consequences. They were out there somewhere, living as me, doing things that would eventually become my problem. The hospital placed me on administrative leave, pending resolution of the various legal matters. Not because they doubted my innocence. My employment records clearly demonstrated I couldn't have been in Phoenix, Nevada, and Florida simultaneously. But the complexity of the situation, the federal investigations, the outstanding warrant, all created liability concerns that required institutional caution. I spent months unraveling the damage. The IRS case required affidavits, employment verification, and ultimately an in-person audit that consumed 3 full days. The Arizona warrant required a court appearance where I presented evidence of my whereabouts during the alleged crimes. The Nevada mortgages required fraud investigations through multiple financial institutions. The Florida business required federal agents to accept that I hadn't laundered money for drug cartels. Each resolution cost time and money. Attorney fees accumulated. Travel expenses mounted. Lost wages from administrative leave strained my finances. I was paying the price for crimes I hadn't committed, for a life I had never lived, for an identity I no longer fully controlled. The forensic investigation eventually identified the source of my initial data exposure. In 2016, a healthcare company I had briefly worked for experienced a data breach. Employee records were stolen, including social security numbers, addresses, and employment histories. The breach was disclosed publicly. A credit monitoring service was offered. I had enrolled and then forgotten about it. What I didn't know was that my data had been combined with information from other breaches. Database aggregators on the dark web specialize in this compilation. They take partial records from multiple sources and assemble complete identity profiles. A name from one breach, an address from another. security questions from social media scraping, medical information from healthcare hacks. The resulting package becomes more valuable than any individual breach. It becomes a complete person, ready for purchase, ready for use, ready to become someone else's new identity. The collector who assembled my package remained anonymous. The marketplace that sold my identity remained operational. The 4 buyers who purchased my existence remained largely unidentified despite ongoing investigations. I have since implemented every protective measure recommended by identity theft experts. Credit freezes with all bureaus, fraud alerts on all accounts, identity monitoring services that scan the dark web for my information, regular reviews of all credit reports and financial statements. But the damage can never be fully repaired. My credit history now contains annotations about identity theft that will remain for years. My name returns unusual results in background checks that require explanation to potential employers and landlords. My tax records contain flags that trigger additional scrutiny with every filing, and somewhere my data still circulates. The dark web doesn't delete information. It copies and distributes and resells indefinitely. My identity package may have been purchased additional times since the original investigation. New versions of me may be emerging in new locations, committing new crimes, accumulating new debts. I exist now in a state of permanent vigilance. Every piece of mail might contain evidence of new fraud. Every phone call might be a detective from a state I've never visited. Every credit check might reveal accounts I never opened. The person who collected and sold my identity earned perhaps $15,000 total from the 4 confirmed sales. The cost to me, financial, professional, psychological, exceeds any reasonable calculation. Years of my life spent proving I am who I claim to be. Relationships strained by the constant stress of identity defense. A career interrupted by circumstances entirely beyond my control. The dark web functions as a marketplace for human existence. Personal information has value. Complete identities have greater value. And the people who trade in this commodity face minimal consequences while their victims bear tremendous burdens. You don't have to access the dark web to become its merchandise. Your data already exists there, compiled from dozens of breaches you may never have known occurred. The only question is whether someone has purchased it yet. And if they have, you won't know until the consequences arrive at your door. The package contained my own photographs, printed on glossy paper, taken through windows I never knew were being watched. My name is Kellen, and during August of 2017, I made a purchase on the dark web that cost me far more than the cryptocurrency I spent. I'm sharing this account because the illusion of anonymity nearly destroyed my life, and I believe others deserve to understand exactly what they're risking when they access those hidden networks. I was 26 years old, working as a graphic designer for an advertising agency in Portland, Oregon. I considered myself technologically competent. I understood VPNs, encryption, and the basic architecture of online privacy. When I first accessed the dark web through Tor browser, I felt protected by layers of security that supposedly made me untraceable. The curiosity began innocently enough. I had read articles about the hidden internet, about marketplaces selling everything from rare books to illegal substances. I wanted to see it for myself. Not to purchase anything dangerous or illegal, just to witness this parallel digital world that existed beneath the surface of my everyday browsing. For several weeks, I simply explored. I navigated through forums and marketplaces, observing without participating. The anonymity felt liberating. I could read discussions about topics that would never appear on the regular internet. I could witness transactions that operated completely outside legal frameworks. I was a ghost, invisible, protected by cryptographic protocols that even government agencies struggled to penetrate. Then I found the marketplace that specialized in security equipment. The vendor claimed to sell high-grade surveillance detection devices, equipment that could identify hidden cameras, GPS trackers, audio bugs. The kind of gear used by private investigators and corporate security professionals. Nothing illegal about the products themselves, just difficult to obtain through normal retail channels, without extensive background checks and waiting periods. I had recently ended a relationship with a woman named Astrid, who had exhibited increasingly controlling behavior during our final months together. She had shown up at locations I hadn't told her about. She had referenced conversations I'd had in private. I suspected she had installed some form of surveillance on my devices or in my apartment, and I wanted equipment to detect it. The marketplace vendor had excellent reviews, hundreds of verified transactions, a reputation score that suggested reliability. I created a cryptocurrency wallet, purchased enough Bitcoin to cover the order, and submitted my shipping information. This was my critical error, my fatal mistake. In retrospect, the stupidity of my decision seems incomprehensible. But at the time, I rationalized that the vendor needed an address to ship physical goods. I rationalized that my Tor connection protected my identity. I rationalized that thousands of people ordered items from dark web marketplaces every day without consequence. I provided my real home address. The package arrived 11 days later, a plain brown box with no return address. Inside, I found the detection equipment I had ordered, a radio frequency detector, a camera lens finder, and a GPS scanning device. Everything appeared legitimate. Professional grade, exactly as advertised. I swept my apartment thoroughly. I found nothing. Either Astrid hadn't been surveilling me, or she had removed any devices before our relationship ended. Either way, the equipment had served its purpose. I stored the devices in my closet and tried to move on with my life. 3 weeks later, a second package arrived. I hadn't ordered anything. The box was identical to the first. Plain brown cardboard, no return address. My name and address printed on a white label in a generic font. The weight felt different, lighter than the detection equipment. I brought it inside with growing unease. Inside the box, I found photographs of me, taken through my apartment windows, taken from angles that suggested someone had been standing in the parking lot outside my building, taken at different times of day and night, capturing me eating dinner, watching television, working on my laptop, and sleeping in my bed. Dozens of photographs, printed on glossy paper. Each one was dated in small text in the corner, showing they had been captured over 2 weeks following my initial dark web purchase. At the bottom of the box, beneath the photographs, I found a single sheet of paper with a typed message. "You thought you were anonymous. We know everything. Your address, your workplace, your daily routine, your bank accounts, your family, your secrets. The first package was a test. You passed. Now the real game begins." My hands were shaking so violently that I could barely hold the paper. Someone had obtained my information from that dark web transaction. Someone had traveled to Portland. Someone had been photographing me for weeks while I lived my life completely unaware. I called the police immediately. 2 officers arrived within an hour. They documented the photographs and the threatening message. They asked questions about my dark web activity that I answered honestly, knowing that admitting to browsing illegal marketplaces was preferable to being murdered by an unknown stalker. The officers were sympathetic, but offered little hope. The package had no fingerprints, no DNA evidence, no traceable origin. The photographs contained no metadata that could identify the camera or location. The typed message revealed nothing about its author. Without more evidence, they could file a report, but couldn't launch a meaningful investigation. I installed security cameras around my apartment that same evening. I purchased a home security system with professional monitoring. I changed my locks. I varied my daily routine. I stopped using the same routes to work. I became hyper-vigilant in ways that exhausted me mentally and physically. For 2 weeks, nothing happened. I began to wonder if the message had been an empty threat. Perhaps some dark web entity had obtained my information and sent a scare package as punishment for browsing their marketplace without completing more purchases. Perhaps it was a twisted form of marketing, designed to terrify me into buying more products or services. Perhaps it was already over. Then the emails began. They arrived at my work address, an address I had never provided to anyone on the dark web, an address that wasn't publicly associated with my name, an address that would require significant research to discover. The first email contained photographs of my office building, exterior shots showing the entrance I used each morning, interior shots through the lobby windows, a photograph of my car in the parking garage, license plate clearly visible. The message read, "We see you everywhere. There is no place you can hide. The game continues." I showed the emails to my supervisor. The company's IT department traced the sender to a disposable email account created through a privacy-focused service. The account had been accessed through Tor, making the actual source impossible to identify. The photographs contained no useful metadata. Another dead end. My employer hired a private security consultant to assess the threat. The consultant was a former FBI agent who specialized in cyberstalking cases. He reviewed all the evidence and delivered a conclusion that offered no comfort. "This person has significant resources and technical sophistication," he explained. "They obtained your address from a dark web transaction, which means they either operated that marketplace or had access to its back-end databases. They've conducted physical surveillance in 2 locations. They've identified your workplace through methods that suggest access to data brokers or possibly hacked databases. This is not a casual threat. This is someone with capability and apparent motivation." The consultant recommended immediate relocation, a complete digital identity reset, new devices, new accounts, new routines. Essentially, he recommended that I abandon my entire life and start fresh somewhere else. I couldn't afford that. I had a lease, a job, a social network, a life I had spent years building. I couldn't simply disappear because someone on the dark web had decided to terrorize me. I made a different choice. I decided to fight back. I hired a cybersecurity firm to analyze the threatening emails and attempt to trace their origin. I hired a private investigator to monitor my apartment and identify anyone conducting surveillance. I increased my security measures to levels that bordered on paranoia. I essentially declared war on my invisible stalker. For 3 weeks, neither the cybersecurity firm nor the private investigator found anything useful. The emails stopped arriving. The surveillance, if it continued, remained undetectable. I began to hope that my aggressive response had discouraged my tormentor. On September 14th, 2017, I came home from work to find my apartment door unlocked. I had locked it that morning. I was certain. I had developed a ritual of checking the lock 3 times before leaving. A compulsive behavior born from constant fear. The door was now unlocked. I didn't enter. I called 911 from the hallway. Police arrived within minutes. They cleared the apartment room by room, finding no intruders, no signs of forced entry, nothing obviously disturbed. But something had changed. My laptop was open on the kitchen table. I always closed it when leaving for work. The screen displayed a document I had never created. The document contained my entire life, my social security number, my bank account details, my credit card information, my medical records, my employment history, my family members' names and addresses, my internet browsing history for the past 3 years. My private messages from platforms I thought were secure. My photographs from cloud storage I thought was encrypted. Everything. Every piece of data that defined my existence was compiled into a single document titled Kellen Complete Profile.doc. At the bottom of the document, a final message. The game is over. You lost. We could destroy you completely. We could take your money, your identity, your reputation. We could make you disappear. But that would end our entertainment. Instead, we will watch. We will always watch. Every device you use, every place you go, every person you trust. We are there. We are everywhere. Welcome to your new life, Kellen. I moved out of that apartment the following week. I quit my job. I relocated to a different city. I changed my phone number, my email addresses, and my banking institutions. I did everything the security consultant had originally recommended. 17,000 strangers received my home address, my phone number, and my photograph within 6 hours of a single anonymous post. I go by Seren, and what I'm describing occurred during April of 2018 in my townhouse outside Charlotte, North Carolina. I was a freelance journalist covering technology and privacy topics for various online publications. The cruel irony of my situation is that I wrote extensively about digital security while making a catastrophic error that exposed me to the worst elements of the internet. My downfall began with research. I was working on an investigative piece about dark web communities dedicated to harassment and intimidation. These forums coordinated attacks on individuals who had offended their sensibilities in some way. Activists, journalists, politicians, random people who had posted opinions that angered the wrong anonymous collective. The attacks followed predictable patterns. First, the target would be doxxed, their personal information compiled and published publicly. Home address, phone number, workplace, family members. Every detail that could be used to make someone's life miserable. Then the harassment would begin. Hundreds of phone calls, threatening messages, pizza deliveries at 3 a.m., emergency services dispatched to the victim's address. Employers are being contacted with false accusations. Family members are targeted with the same treatment. Some victims experienced this harassment for weeks. Others endured it for months. A few had been driven to complete life upheaval, relocating and changing identities to escape the relentless torment. I wanted to understand how these communities operated. I wanted to expose their methods and perhaps help future victims protect themselves. I accessed the dark web through Tor, took what I believed were appropriate precautions, and began observing one of the most notorious harassment forums. For several weeks, I lurked without participating. I documented their language, their organizational methods, and their selection criteria for targets. I witnessed coordinated attacks unfold in real time, watching as innocent people's lives were systematically dismantled by anonymous strangers who viewed destruction as entertainment. I was careful. I never created an account. I never posted anything. I never revealed any identifying information. I simply observed, gathering material for my article. But I made a mistake. One evening, while reviewing the forum, I accidentally clicked a link that I thought led to an archived discussion. Instead, it triggered a script that attempted to identify my real IP address despite my Tor protection. The exploit took advantage of a vulnerability in an outdated browser plugin I hadn't realized was still active. For perhaps 3 seconds, my actual connection was exposed to whoever operated that link. 3 seconds were enough. Within an hour, a new thread appeared on the forum. The title was my real name, my full legal name, which I had never used anywhere online in connection with my journalism work. The first post contained everything: my home address in Charlotte, my phone number, my email addresses, both professional and personal, photographs scraped from social media accounts I had set to private, my parents' names and their address in Virginia, my sister's name and her workplace in Atlanta, the name of a man I had been dating for 3 months. The second post explained why I had been targeted. This journalist was spying on our community. She thinks she can write and expose and destroy what we've built. She thinks she's protected. She's not. Tonight, we show her what happens to those who threaten us. Tonight, she becomes the story. Within 6 hours, the thread had accumulated over 300 responses. Some posted additional information they had discovered about me, my high school, my college, former roommates, ex-boyfriends, medical conditions I had mentioned in private emails years ago. Others posted threats, graphic descriptions of violence, detailed fantasies about what should happen to journalists who invaded their space, promises to appear at my home, promises to contact my family, promises to ensure I never write another word about anything. And some simply posted encouragement, cheerleading for the destruction of my life, celebrating my terror as entertainment, treating my existence as content for their amusement. The phone call started around midnight, not just to my phone, to my parents' landline in Virginia, to my sister's cell phone, to the man I had been dating, all simultaneously as dozens of anonymous callers coordinated their harassment across multiple targets. The calls contained threats, accusations, graphic descriptions, recordings of my voice taken from a podcast appearance I had made months earlier, edited and manipulated into statements I had never made. Demands that I delete all my work. Demands that I disappear from the internet forever. Demands that I suffer for my perceived transgression. I called the police. They arrived quickly, took my statement, and acknowledged that they had seen similar cases before. Swatting, doxing, coordinated online harassment. They understood the severity. They also admitted their limitations. These individuals operate anonymously through networks we can't easily trace, the responding officer explained. We can document the threats. We can increase patrols in your area. But we can't arrest people we can't identify in jurisdictions we can't access. The harassment escalated over the following days. Emergency services were dispatched to my address 7 times in 1 week. Armed police responded to false reports of hostage situations. Fire trucks arrived for non-existent fires. Ambulances appeared for medical emergencies that hadn't occurred. Each incident required explanation. Each incident wasted public resources. Each incident reminded me that strangers could summon authorities to my door at will. My employer received hundreds of emails accusing me of fabricated crimes, plagiarism, fraud, harassment of sources. The accusations were obviously false, but they required investigation. My editor stood by me, but the constant stream of manufactured complaints strained even supportive relationships. My dating relationship ended. The man I had been seeing couldn't handle the intrusion into his life. His phone rang constantly with threatening calls. His workplace received accusations about his character. His family was dragged into a nightmare they had never consented to experience. He apologized as he left, but I couldn't blame him. No one should have to endure collateral damage from a war they didn't start. I tried to document everything for potential legal action. I saved screenshots, recorded calls, and compiled evidence of the coordinated campaign. A lawyer I consulted estimated that pursuing civil cases against identifiable participants could cost hundreds of thousands of dollars with uncertain outcomes. Criminal prosecution would require law enforcement resources that simply weren't available for internet harassment. The physical manifestations were perhaps the most terrifying. 3 weeks into the campaign, I found a note taped to my front door. Handwritten. Local. Someone had physically traveled to my townhouse and left a message. "We know you're home alone tonight. We've been watching. Internet isn't the only place we exist." I called the police again. They dusted for fingerprints. None found. They canvassed neighbors. No one had witnessed anything. They checked my security cameras. The individual had approached from an angle that avoided all coverage. The forum celebrated this development. Someone posted a photograph of my front door, taken from the street, with the note visible. They had documented their physical intrusion for the entertainment of their community. They had proven that their reach extended beyond the digital realm. I abandoned my journalism career entirely, unwilling to maintain the public presence that made me targetable. The harassment gradually decreased over the following months. Without fresh information to circulate, without new content to mock and threaten, the forum's interest in me faded. They moved on to other targets, other lives to destroy, other entertainment to consume. But I never recovered my sense of safety. I paid for information. What I received was a demonstration that the service I had contacted could reach me far more easily than I could ever reach them. The name I use for this account is LON, and these events occurred during March of 2015 in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I was a private investigator, working primarily on insurance fraud and infidelity cases. Standard surveillance work, background checks. Nothing that should have intersected with the darkest corners of the internet. But a case pushed me beyond my usual boundaries, and that transgression nearly cost me everything. A client approached me with an unusual request. Her daughter had disappeared 3 years earlier, under circumstances that police had eventually classified as voluntary missing person. The daughter was an adult. No evidence of crime existed. The case had been closed without resolution. The mother believed differently. She believed her daughter had been manipulated by an online predator. She believed the disappearance was engineered rather than chosen. She had spent years searching through normal channels without results. She wanted me to explore abnormal channels. The mother had heard rumors that information brokers operated on the dark web, individuals who could access databases, track digital histories, locate people who didn't want to be found. She was willing to pay substantial fees for any lead that might restore her daughter. I should have declined the case. My expertise was conventional investigation, surveillance, interviews, public records. The dark web was outside my professional competence, but the mother's desperation moved me. 3 years without knowing if her child was alive or dead. 3 years of imagining the worst. I agreed to explore options I had never previously considered. I spent 2 weeks researching how to access dark web services safely. I learned about Tor, about cryptocurrency, about the marketplaces that connected buyers with sellers of illegal services. I created what I believed were secure, anonymous identities. I took precautions that seemed adequate at the time. I found a service that advertised information acquisition. The listing claimed capabilities, including database access, location tracking, social media penetration, and comprehensive background investigations. The reviews, if dark web reviews could be trusted, suggested reliability and discretion. I initiated contact through encrypted messaging. I described the case in general terms. Missing person. 3 years gone. Last known online presence included several platforms that might contain clues. I asked about pricing and methodology. The response came within hours. The service provider, who used the name Architect, outlined a tiered pricing structure. Basic database searches cost relatively little. Comprehensive digital footprint analysis cost more. Active location tracking, if the subject used any connected devices, commanded premium fees. I negotiated on behalf of my client. We agreed on a mid-tier package that would include database searches, social media archaeology, and analysis of the daughter's last known digital activities. I transferred cryptocurrency totaling approximately $8,000, the client's money, with her full knowledge and consent. I provided the daughter's name, date of birth, last known address, and the usernames she had used on various platforms. For 2 weeks, Architect provided regular updates, database results showing the daughter's information appearing in various breach compilations, social media accounts that had been deleted but remained archived on third-party sites, a timeline of her digital activity leading up to her disappearance. The information was genuinely useful. It suggested the daughter had been communicating with an individual who used multiple pseudonyms across different platforms. It provided geographic indicators that she might have relocated to the Pacific Northwest. It gave the mother more concrete leads than 3 years of conventional searching had produced. Then Architect requested additional payment for advanced location services. I hesitated. The initial results had been valuable, but the case had already consumed the client's budget. I asked for specifics about what the additional services would entail before committing further resources. Architect's response changed everything. The message contained information about me, not the anonymous identity I had created for dark web interactions. Me, my real name, my home address in Minneapolis, the name of my investigative firm, my client list for the previous year, my personal cell phone number, my vehicle registration, my mother's address in Wisconsin. The message concluded. You asked what advanced location services entail. This is a demonstration. We found you in 47 minutes. Consider carefully whether you wish to continue this professional relationship or whether you wish to terminate it cleanly. The choice determines what we do with what we've learned. I stared at the screen, my blood running cold. They had penetrated every layer of protection I had constructed. My Tor connection, my anonymous email, my cryptocurrency purchased through what I thought were untraceable methods. 47 minutes, less than an hour to completely unmask someone who believed themselves invisible. The implication was clear. I could continue paying and receive potentially valuable information, or I could attempt to withdraw and face unknown consequences from people who now knew exactly where I lived. I chose a third option. I contacted law enforcement. The FBI field office in Minneapolis had a cybercrime division that handled dark web investigations. I disclosed everything, my unauthorized access to illegal marketplaces, the money I had transferred, the case I had been working, the threatening message I had received. The agents were less concerned with my legal exposure than with the intelligence I could provide about Architect's operation. They had been tracking this service for months. Multiple victims had reported similar experiences, information purchased for seemingly legitimate purposes, followed by extortion based on the buyer's own exposed identity. Architect wasn't just an information broker. They were running a reverse operation. They attracted clients seeking sensitive information, then harvested those clients' identities for secondary exploitation. The FBI asked me to continue communicating with Architect under their supervision. They wanted to gather evidence. They wanted to trace the cryptocurrency flows. They wanted to identify the individuals behind the operation. I agreed. For 3 weeks, I maintained the pretense of a cooperative client while agents monitored every exchange. But Architect was more sophisticated than federal investigators anticipated. On the 19th day of the operation, I received a package at my office. No return address, no postmark suggesting origin. Inside, I found photographs of my home, my vehicle, my elderly mother entering her apartment in Wisconsin, and a printed note. Federal involvement detected. Communication terminated. consider what we know about you and everyone you care about. Reconsider your cooperation carefully. They had identified the FBI involvement. They had conducted physical surveillance in 2 states. They had demonstrated capabilities that transcended digital operations entirely. The agents increased protection around my home and my mother's residence. They accelerated their investigation. But within a week, all of Architect's digital infrastructure had vanished. The marketplace listing disappeared. The encrypted messaging accounts went dormant. The cryptocurrency wallets were emptied, and the coins tumbled through dozens of transactions designed to obscure their ultimate destination. Architect dissolved into the darkness they had emerged from. For the following year, I lived in constant anticipation of consequences. Every unknown caller might be them. Every unfamiliar vehicle near my home might be surveillance. Every piece of mail might contain another demonstration of their reach. The direct threats never materialized. Perhaps the FBI involvement had made me too risky a target. Perhaps they moved on to easier victims. Perhaps they simply enjoyed the demonstration of power without requiring further action. But the psychological damage was substantial. I closed my investigative practice. I couldn't responsibly take cases when my own identity had been so thoroughly compromised by criminals who remained unidentified and unpunished. The client whose daughter had disappeared received the information we had gathered before the relationship with Architect dissolved. The leads suggested her daughter might be alive in Oregon. Further investigation through legitimate channels eventually confirmed this. The daughter had willingly fled a controlling home environment and had no interest in reconnection. That resolution provided no comfort to me. I had ventured into territories I was unprepared to navigate. I had exposed myself to predators who operated at levels of sophistication that ordinary security measures couldn't address. The dark web isn't just dangerous for the obvious reasons. It's not just illegal goods and violent services. It's dangerous because the people who operate there have developed capabilities that most users cannot even conceptualize. You believe you're anonymous because the technology tells you so. They know you're not anonymous because they've spent years developing methods to penetrate exactly those protections. You believe you're the customer, the one with power, the one seeking services. They understand that every customer is also potential prey. Every interaction on the dark web involves parties with vastly asymmetric capabilities. You are almost certainly the less capable party. And that asymmetry creates vulnerabilities that can destroy everything you're trying to protect. I spent 20 years as a professional investigator. I understood surveillance. I understood digital tracking. I understood the mechanics of finding people who didn't want to be found. I understood nothing about the real capabilities that exist in those hidden networks. And that ignorance nearly ruined my life. The daughter who was eventually located is living comfortably in Portland. The mother who hired me passed away without ever speaking to her child again. The FBI investigation into the architect remains open but inactive. And I remain hypervigilant, understanding that somewhere, in databases I cannot access, my complete identity sits ready for use by anyone willing to pay. Those were 3 genuine accounts from individuals whose lives intersected with the dark web in devastating ways. 3 reminders that the hidden internet isn't a consequence-free playground for curiosity. Before you close this video, understand these essential facts about protecting yourself. First, your data already exists on the dark web. Major breaches have exposed billions of records. Assume your information has been compromised and act accordingly. Freeze your credit with all 3 bureaus. Monitor your accounts regularly. Use unique passwords for every service. Second, anonymity tools protect you less than you believe. Tor provides privacy from casual observation. It does not make you invisible to sophisticated operators who control the services you're accessing. Never provide real information on any dark web platform. Third, curiosity has costs. Every click leaves traces. Every connection creates risk. Every moment spent in those hidden networks exposes you to individuals who view exploitation as entertainment or income. The safest interaction with the dark web is no interaction at all. Drop a comment telling me where you watched this from and what time it shows on your clock now. I want to know who experienced these warnings with me tonight. Subscribe, like, ring that notification bell so you never miss any of our stories. Stay visible in the light. Stay safe in your digital life. Until next time, see you in our next story.